Hello, I'm Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my blog, where it's both my mission and pleasure to highlight my creative journey, to give you specific takeaways, to give you inspiration, all in the hopes that your creative journey is a little bit easier than mine, perhaps. Now, before I fully get into things, I would like to take the opportunity to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already. That way you get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and thank you if you already were. It truly does mean a lot to me, as I hope it does to you. So, the bulk of last week, a big chunk of it was put into writing grants, specifically film grants, to try to get funding for my feature film In Search of Sunrise. And what a process that was. I mean, so many film grants were written, and each one asks very specific questions. They are similar enough and yet different in terms of the answers that they're requiring, that you can't just kind of take what you have pre-existing and alter it for a specific grant. That really is writing custom text for everything. And there, I would say on average, each film grant probably has at least like 20 questions. And by 20, you're kind of having to like write an essay for each question. So it's a very rigorous and arduous process, rightfully so. I mean, if they're going to give you a sizable amount, then one would expect that they vet you properly, right? So that was a large chunk of what I spent my free time on last week. And it's kind of funny looking back on it, because you do enough of these. There's kind of ones that, because of the pandemic right now, they're on hold and other such stuff. So you kind of have to look everywhere you can for the various film grants that are out there that might be applicable to one's film. You don't want to be signing up for stuff that doesn't make sense. For example, there was film grants that I saw that, you had to kind of talk about why your movie was a piece of non-commercial work. And it's like, well, I don't think mine would qualify for that, right? Because it would be a piece of commercial work. So it's like, okay, cool. Right. So you kind of have to do a little bit of vetting in that sense. And, then you just kind of see what's out there. But, the good news is when you search, you can find, right? When you spend the time, there are plenty of opportunities out there to get funding, potential funding. Now, I say potential funding because it's ironic. I was talking with one of my friends this weekend, and it's almost like sometimes the more you do the work and you go through this action steps, the more like imposter syndrome kicks in, where like, you do all this work. I've kind of talked about it in weeks past about going a full court press, right? Trying to anywhere and everywhere that I can to get this funding. That's what I'm going to try to do, obviously within reason and so forth. But nonetheless, really just going for it and not being afraid. And, then after having done, and not that this journey is complete in any sense, right? There's still many more people I have to reach out to. And certainly the ones that I've reached out to, I have to hear back. But it's, the large number that I have reached out to, it's going to take weeks, if not months, for some, certainly the film grants to respond, right? Submissions are open for some of these, till like, let's say, beginning of June. And so that means in June, they'll start to actually read through these. So I won't hear back for quite a bit, but that waiting period, right, introduces like this imposter syndrome, where you're like, that was stupid. Why did they do that? Of course, they're not going to select it. What's the point? Why did I just put myself through this? It was just so much work and it's all for nothing. And I don't know, you kind of just have to hear that voice out and be like, okay, I get you. Well, hungry mouths don't get fed, or whatever other cliche you want to, just acknowledge the voice that's there and continue kind of on. And I think that's the best that you can do sometimes. Because I don't know, it's interesting. I don't think, at least in my life yet, it hasn't been avoidable. but I try to acknowledge it and just say, that's fine, but what's the alternative, right? So, because the alternative is, operating at a place of what I would call creative fear. And in fact, a little bit of last week was I saw examples of that in some of the responses I did get. There was somebody who said like, "Hey, I really love the idea, but it might be wiser to do it as an audio drama instead, and then kind of build from there. Have you considered that?" And I was like, well, given that the title's In Search of Sunrise, uh, how do you dramatize the sun through audio, right? And not only that, I mean, it's very much written to be visual. So maybe it could work as a comic book, maybe it could work as a book, but it was intended to be a movie. And so, no, I said no. I don't think it works as an audio drama. But interestingly enough, I was kind of, I talked with the various mentors in my life, and or just people that I really respect, and there were a few people like, what if you did turn it into an audio drama? Maybe there's an opportunity there for that. I was like, I'm really sorry. I'm just really not interested in that. And it does kind of showcase to me, like, yeah, even the people that I respect sometimes do operate from a place of fear. It's not that it's that their advice isn't well intended, but they don't want to see you suffer, and so sometimes they give you this, let's call it the smaller advice, right? The advice that doesn't necessarily go for the big, bold ambition. I think we all need to stop that. I mean, listen, if I'm going to fall flat on my face, I'm going to fall flat on my face, but at least I'll have gotten farther. I'll have learned something and so forth. And I think that goes for any creative. Like, what are we so mortally afraid of in terms of failure, right? I mean, how many things have been proven that failure is a necessary step forward to success, right? In all aspects, right? Scientifically speaking, developmentally speaking, like everything, right? And so why are we so hesitant against that? I just don't know, right? And the only thing is, like, it's fear, right? We just can't accept that we would fail because society has like deemed the F word as this end all be all, which is stupid. But interestingly enough, it did get me to thinking about an audio drama. I was, in the back of my mind, I've been toying with this idea that I wanted to write in terms of what would be or could have been my next novel. I was like, you know what? It's a fun idea. It would work enough. Let me really kind of develop this idea and see if I can come up with a 10-episode season 1 version of this idea for an audio drama, and then bring that back to the friend that said, that it should be an audio drama because that's something more in his wheelhouse and he could help with. So I'm like, okay, let me really fast track this. And so over the weekend, or over the course of like last week in general, I really wrote out the characters, because that was kind of step one, is really hammering down, who are these characters. And then I started outlining the story itself, right? And so the way I'm looking at it, so it's in theory 10 episodes, and I want to have 2 acts in each episode, right? So that's kind of how I've broken it: 10 episodes, and then act 1 of each episode, and then act 2, and doing it that way. So I was kind of going through it. I got as far as episode 6 so far. So still kind of need to finish up the rest of the episodes, but getting there, right? And I obviously have an end goal in sight, and I don't know necessarily how good it is, but that's kind of the interesting thing about it, right? Is and I think like every writer will have a similar sentiment to this, where in your mind, every story is perfect, right? The dialogue is crisp, that pacing flows better than a stream of water down a mountain in spring. you know, there's plot twists at every page and so forth. It's so riveting that the audience member can't let go of what's there. They're just fully engaged. Their heart is pounding when it needs to pound. They're crying, they're laughing, all that jazz, right? And yet, when these ideas go onto the page kills the magic of this idea. And of course, it's ultimately facetious and being funny about it because, of course, it just goes to show that, the idea that was in your head wasn't as great as you thought. And the only way to actually get it to be good is to put it to the page, the proverbial page, and really sculpt it and work it, right? It's really about, writing is as much about the revision process as it is writing. Really great art and great storytelling comes from a really rigorous revision process. Just no doubt about it. So, in that sense, that's why I only got as far as like episode 6. And, I have to, I'm not going to judge what came before it. I think it's, it is what it is. Let me just get to the end. Because it's too easy to be critical in this part of the process. Let me just get to the end. And then once I have something, then I can build on that and really go, okay, this doesn't work, but this works. Let me change this up, yada, 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 right? It's a wacky idea. It's like Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett's Good Omens meets Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure with a little bit of Time Bandits / Monty Python for good measure. Right, so it's definitely zany and satirical, and I'm kind of going for it in that sense. And it's definitely not going to be for everybody, but I think the people that are into the Austin Powers, South Park, and all that stuff will certainly appreciate something like this, or I hope, right? That would be the hope. And this is going to be, it's exciting in that sense where, I think it'll be some work, definitely, for sure. But I'm excited to venture into this. I've had a lot of respect for audio dramas. I listen to a lot of them. I think they are very underappreciated, and so it'd be really cool to step into this and work with a lot of my actor friends. Cast them into these various roles and tell a story. And this will be my first time kind of telling a story more long form. I think ultimately, given the length. The story itself will be like 2.5 hours if you were to binge it. It's just a best guess at this point in time, but roughly about that. So, a little bit longer than, a typical feature length film, not including like the Marvel ones and so forth, but just in general. But nonetheless, it tells, it's a very involved story and whatnot, and then kind of having a cliffhanger for each episode. So that's kind of a new experience for me in terms of having to think about that. And also, building to this satisfying climax at the end of this season, but also leaving it open that there could be a season 2 and beyond, right? That's part of this exercise. So really looking forward to it in that sense. And we'll see, we'll see kind of once I assess how good the idea is, how good the outline thus far is once I finish up the all 10 episodes, let's say. The other thing that I've been continuing to do is just revise some chapters in my nonfiction book, updating Master Mental Fortitude, really trying to kind of just give it a polish. And not that it's necessary, but nonetheless, I felt, I don't know, I was just kind of compelled to it. It's this weird relationship I have with it where on the one hand, I love it because I'm rediscovering the words I wrote and I'm like, this is some really good stuff. On the other hand, I loathe it because I'm like, in a sense, it is kind of going backwards and things like that. But, just trying to do right by this work and, just give that update and then I can move on to new stuff. So I've been kind of working on that. And then it's interesting, this whole like book publishing world. Just in the past, let's say year, I've really kind of started to get a better grasp on things, right? I was actually talking with one of my friends yesterday, and she had written a draft, and she kind of submitted to someone that she knew, and they requested the manuscript, and she's like, "Oh shit, I only have like a first draft of it. Like it's not, it's definitely needs to be polished up." So it's a kind of trial by fire in that sense. And we talked and I gave her some advice, and I said like, "I'm here for you if you need me. I'm happy to guide you." And she's like, "No, definitely, I want to continue to pick your brain and stuff like that." So I said, "Yeah, absolutely." But yeah, it's really cool, kind of that I can have that experience. Certainly by no means am I like a published author in the traditional sense. And certainly and I doubt that like my novel would be a New York Times bestseller, but nonetheless, that doesn't mean I don't have something to offer, right? At least from my experience, kind of really getting started breaking in, and the whole idea of rejection throughout until you find kind of the few agents and publishers that really see the value of your work, right? And kind of part of when I talked about the film grant stuff for my film, part of that, what I was alluding to, is this idea that there's obviously a similarity of I'm having to send out all these things, and for most of them, the response will be a rejection, much like with my book. And it's not that there was anything wrong with that, but I just know how arduous and a long process that was. And so, yeah, it's like, am I mentally prepared for that sort of journey? I very much I don't like things to be outside of my control. With my first feature film, it was something, I had to take a leap of faith and get people on board, meaning, my friends to come on as crew and actors. But, once that happened, that like convincing them and really wrangling them, that was within my control, right? And filming it and editing it was all within my control. In Search of Sunrise it's not outside my control, or it is outside my control, right? Even on a smaller scale budget, I can't make the movie without some help. And that's something that perhaps my ego just can't get a grasp on, but I just have to accept it and just go along for the journey, right? Going back to books, I've been slacking for the past couple of months on a film book. It's a book based on me making my first feature film, and it's partly it's autobiographical, but it's really using those experiences as jumping off points, for various lessons to be able to teach to other filmmakers and inspire them to just go out there and make the movie they want to make, right, with the friends that they have. And I've dictated into a microphone the various chapters and gone through that, right? I have an outline, so I've dictated chapters. Obviously, what I've dictated very much needs a polish. But I was talking with a friend of mine who is experienced in the publishing world, and I said, should I write the book, or can I just go to a publisher first and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking, is this of interest to you? And we kind of came to the conclusion, like maybe a hybrid, maybe a sample of a couple of chapters that are really well polished and a detailed outline, along with a query letter, and then if they do like it, they can see the sample chapters, and if they want to really continue forth, then I would write the rest of it. Not that I won't write this book, but it would give me some more motivation if there's somebody kind of within the marketplace, let's say, that's interested in it. That just gives me a little bit of extra motivation than just writing it completely on my own, and then knowing that in the back of my back pocket I can definitely self-publish. But going through the process. I don't know. It's just a little bit different when someone kind of validates you a little bit at the start of a journey rather than, once you've gone through the journey and now you're like, hey, I made this product. Do you like it? No, right? So I'm trying to just kind of mix things up. And the last thing I'll talk about is like creatively, one of the things that I've been kind of pondering, it's this weird in between time where, I've got kind of things going, but at the same time, it's like, what is my next move? What do I commit to? Obviously, I want to make the audio drama and things like that. And part of it is, just in thinking about things, I'm probably like starting to bite off more than I can chew. But I don't know, just the film making monkey on my back just wants to make a movie, and maybe it's in direct reference to In Search of Sunrise and not being able to control that. So I'm trying to like just desperately find something that like I can control in terms of that space, right? The filmmaking space. So I've been thinking about, like what can I do where like I take a couple of friends and we go for like a week to like, let's say Lake Tahoe or some other destination and just, knock out a whole movie within that time period, right? Film it and kind of like we did, it's not one-to-one, but, similarly like how we did my first feature film. So I kind of thinking about that. But then of course, it's like, I don't, that means I have to develop a whole new story. And do I have another story in me, because I'm also trying to develop this audio drama, and whatnot. So it's like, can I find something within the public domain that I can adapt and whatnot? And would that work? So, and, we'll see how kind of all this goes. But, this is just kind of some of the stuff that's been in my head, that I've been kind of processing and working through. Anyway, I hope me sharing all this stuff helps you in some sort of way. As always, if you have any questions or thoughts of your own, please comment down below or hit me up on social media at Svitek. Happy to converse with you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day and life to see what I'm up to. It really does mean a lot to me, as I hope it does to you, and hope to see you next time.